So as I say, this Sunday we focus on those seekers, the seekers that we've come to call the wise men, and we've also given them the fact that there's three. But you realize Scripture only says that there were three gifts, and so we just kind of put that in, that you have to have three gift givers if you got three gifts, right? So there could have been more, but we know that there were three gifts, and we remember them as we come to the season of Epiphany tomorrow, and this Epiphany Sunday. With this story, we complete our celebration of Christmas. And that's why I asked for the undecorating to just put on pause. Let's not do it until after this weekend. These pilgrims, these seekers from the East have something to teach us as we begin this series of sermons in which we look at other world religions and our Christian faith, and how do we understand other world religions as we practice our Christian faith. If we pause and reflect and walk on the journey that the wise men took, we too are on a pilgrimage as well. Listen with me for the Word of God found here in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who's been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him, and calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Thanks be to God for this reading of the Gospel of Matthew. So Matt and I will be offering in our worship services in this next few weeks, we'll be offering a look at world religions and how they inform our Christian faith. Today I'd like to respond to a few questions that just kind of are base questions as we look at world religions. Why explore such a topic is a first question for your pastors. Why would you do such a thing? How should we view other religions when it comes to our own Christian faith? And is there one way or many in finding God's favor, many ways to find God's favor? Well, there are differing views that we all encounter concerning faith and beliefs and practicing our faith. We encounter people with differing values, and I'm not just talking about the folks across the street, right? I'm not just talking about St. Pat's and the differences that maybe we have with our Catholic friends. That is actually not part of the topic, realizing we're talking about other faith traditions, and so we honor Catholic faith as a part of our own Christian faith. So this look is encountering people of other world religions, most particularly. For me, in my encounter with people of different faith, it didn't occur until actually I reached high school age. My elementary and junior high years were being raised in a small town of Ohio, Patterson, Ohio. I think it's still on the map. I'm not sure. Only about 200 people lived in Patterson when I was a young child. There was no synagogue, there was no mosque, there was no temple for Buddhists to gather at for a place of worship. It was all Christian churches that I was familiar with growing up in my youth. But when my family moved to the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, there in high school, for the first time, I was in studies in school with Jewish and Muslim children. And then when I studied ministry, at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, I met some Zen Buddhists that practice meditation, Zazen meditation. And such encounters have continually stretched and kind of deepened my own Christian faith by my encounter with other world religions. Perhaps you've had such a stretching relationship experience. We all have what Robert Putnam calls an Aunt Susan to kind of understand a different faith tradition. Maybe you have an Aunt Susan, somewhat of another faith tradition that is now a part of your family. They don't necessarily practice the Christian faith. They may be unaffiliated and agnostic, or perhaps they are of another faith tradition. They married your uncle who was Christian, but they are Jewish or Muslim, and so now you have an Aunt Susan that makes you realize that somebody of another faith tradition is someone that is kind-hearted and someone that you can be in a relationship with, and so our understandings shift. We have those people in our life. Perhaps it's a coworker, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, as this occurs within our lives. Or maybe you've had the experience of your child or your grandchild coming home from studying in social studies another world religion, and they're starting to ask questions about those other faith traditions, and how do I understand them, and how do we make sense of that in our Christian faith. And so that occurs, and how do we understand other faith traditions? The fact is, our children will be living in a more and more diverse world than perhaps we have experienced. Take a look at the numbers alone on world religions. These are the numbers from 2017. Christians make up 2.3 billion members of the world population. Muslims, note that the unaffiliated are becoming now the third largest group, unaffiliated or agnostic or no religion that they profess. Hindus, Buddhists, folk religions, other religions, and then the Jewish faith. So 2/3 of the world does not practice Christianity, is in part what these numbers reveal to us. And so how do we encounter people of other world religions? What would be our most faithful way to respond? Even here in the Cedar Valley, although predominantly Christian faith is what is practiced, we do have encounters with folks who have other religious backgrounds, and how would we encounter them and understand them? I count it a good thing to have that diversity within the Cedar Valley, that there is that diversity. I think that's a good thing for us to realize, because the world is more diverse than perhaps we grew up with. But many of us know that we don't really know that much about other faith traditions, other religions, and so that in part why this sermon series is something that we're digging into, and we'll be looking at 4 world religions and understanding the Christian faith through our encounter and dialogue with Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Judaism. Further, our world is divided, of course, by religion. Wars continue today over religious differences that are there and present. Oftentimes that will be lifted up in the news media that this is a conflict between 2 different faith traditions. We know that it's a bit more impactful than that. It's not just the religions that make for the conflict. There's much that goes into that, the economics and those such things. But you often see that it'll be identified that Jews are in conflict with Muslims in the Middle East, and this has been the case for centuries. Christians are in conflict with Muslims in parts of Africa. And the border of India and Pakistan has a conflict between Hindus and Muslims. For these reasons alone, it's important for people of different faith traditions to explore the bridges that can be built for the common good, and to grow in their understanding of faith with others? How can we live at peace? One way is by respecting and understanding another faith tradition. And as a matter of evangelism, our Christian witness, it's a good thing to be equipped with understanding how to share our faith with another person's faith tradition. Where do we make connections? What are the understandings that clearly are something that we can have conversation about? And where do we differ? And how can we proceed with loving first as we speak of it around here? How do we love first and respect and honor the differences that we have? So, how should we view other religions? First, it's important to understand that the 2/3 world's population are not Christians. Billions of people are faithful to other religions. A large percentage are not religious at all. And that's even true within the Cedar Valley. There are many people that do not claim a religious connection. So our view of other religions and those who are non-religious matters a great deal, especially when it comes to understanding the conflicts that we have with others. I'd like to outline 3 ways that we might describe the spectrum of views of other religions by Christians, and I'll give my understanding at this point in my faith journey and look to the guidance of Matthew chapter 2 as a way of understanding as well. First of all, there would be perhaps a view that is described as pluralist view of religions. This view would say that all religions are pointing to the same goodness, the same love, and the same kind of understandings, and that they're all valid and are okay. No one religion is better than another from a pluralist point of view. Most people who hold this view do so with the desire to show a great respect for all religions, to be open-minded, fair, non-judgmental. Persons with such a view might say, your truth is true for you, and my truth is true for me. I must say this worldview or this understanding of religions is something that I held earlier in my Christian faith. I wanted to be compassionate and sensitive to people that I knew of other faiths, and I liked them, and I certainly didn't want to judge them, and so I thought this must be the right way to view other religions, is to say that they all point to the same God, same love. But later I came to question how we might show respect to all religions through a pluralist point of view. How respectful must it feel to hear someone say that as a Jew and others are Hindus, and they're just all the same. Every one of them is the same. You're the same as Christians, and there's no difference. When they know full well there are differences among the religions, how does that necessarily get received as a good conversation point for them? And how do we hold other religions accountable for justice' sake? How do we hold other religions accountable when they are promoting something that is clearly not a Christian value? How do we do that for an extremist Muslim view? How do we just say that, well, their truth is okay for them and our truth is okay for us, when it means that they practice their faith in a way that is not good for anyone who is non-extremist Muslim? And is this the best way to respect and honor another faith tradition? I struggle with the pluralist view for those reasons of justice alone. How do I hold them accountable? A pluralist view would not try to hold them accountable and just let their views continue. On the other end of the spectrum is from pluralism. Some have named it exclusivist. I don't think that's a very good word to use. I like a word like particularist, which I'm not even sure is a word, but I like the idea of a particular viewpoint. Yes, it's a word among us right now. In the most interpretations of this view, those who don't accept Jesus of Nazareth as the Son of God and as Christ, the Messiah, are condemned and will be excluded from heaven. And so there's this view that it's a particular view, that this is the only particular religion that offers. And so another faith tradition may have that particularist view as well, that I as a Buddhist are the only ones that hold the truth. They would believe that unless people learn their religion, they will not have a connection with a greater good in the world. A slightly more moderate, exclusivist, particularist view might allow God's grace to extend to those who have not heard the good news of Christ. If they've not heard that message, then of course there may be room for them. But all of this tends to come down to being a judgmental kind of sense, that I ultimately judge. And in the end, that's not really true for you and I. We don't judge who makes it into heaven and who is in God's favor and who is not. In the end, this seems a bit too harsh, an exclusive view, a particular view for me to hold. I do agree with the particular nature of Christ. I believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life for me as a Christian. What I'm not ready for is a judgment of another person's salvation, and for me to make that decision. I believe too strongly in the ultimate judgment being left up to God and the room for God's grace to act. God's sovereignty must reign. God will decide in the end. It's not for me. A third answer then, somewhere in between these, is termed an inclusivist point of view. A third answer to the question of how Christians should view other world religions, and one that is closest perhaps to my own point of view, an inclusivist view. This position holds that God is at work among people everywhere, even where there is no Christian witness. It leaves room for an anonymous Christian, someone who's been born and raised in a particular faith tradition, and they act in ways that is clearly Christ-like. Clearly they are kind, and they are compassionate, and they are people of service for the good of the world. And in that regard, they are making a Christian witness anonymously. They are doing everything that a good Christian would be asked to do. My own understanding is that God's grace is working in their lives and in the lives of non-Christians, and God would not write those folks off. In the end, they would find favor with God too. It's not my view that all religions are true, but that some aspects of those religions are true and are something we can understand and uphold. And you and I can learn a great deal from understanding their truth, and their truths can inform our Christian truth and faith and deepen our faith as well when we encounter them in a respectful dialogue. Friends, here's my challenge. It really is a spectrum, and so there's another little addition that I added there, that all of these, no one's really, labels are only just for conversation, right? For use of language. They don't really, no one's actually in one of these positions, but perhaps the spectrum is where we may find ourselves, depending on how we might view a particular issue or topic, even on world religions. Here's my challenge for you this morning, and really during this whole sermon series. Are you willing to base your opinion solely on secondhand information and on something that you learned when you were in the 3rd or 4th grade and you no longer explore those understandings? Or is there something that you recognize that it's a good idea to continue to do your homework and develop a first-hand conviction about other faith traditions and about your Christian faith? It's a serious question. It means that we are active and not passive in our Christian faith. We are engaged, not disengaged. As Christians, we are called to continue to ask and seek and knock and look for truth and understanding, whatever and however they may be found. The scriptural basis for my view is found in the work of looking at the story of Matthew 2 and the Epiphany passage of the coming of the Magi. Here in Matthew, we encounter these wise ones. They were not Jewish. They didn't follow the laws of Moses. And, of course, they weren't Christian because no one was Christian at the time of the birth of Christ. They are described as Eastern astrologers at best. Some form of the actual word is kind of magician, magi, astrologers from the East, practicing a religion of their country, their world. And they were the first to see the Christ, some of the first to come and worship the Christ. We learn people who are seeking after truth, regardless of their religion, will find joy when they discover the truth. And that's the epiphany. That's the profound new understanding that they arrive at. Did they change their faith tradition? Did they become Jewish? We don't know. We don't know more of the story. We do know that they were not going to be honoring Herod. They go home by another road. They resist the empire and decide that they've worshipped the one they want to worship, and they go home by another road. As Adam Hamilton puts it in his book on world religions and Christianity that Matt and I will be using as a conversation point on Wednesday nights for furthering this conversation on world religions, Hamilton suggests that this story of Matthew chapter 2 tells us that God was reaching out to people who were not Jews but who had been seeking God. And God honored their faithfulness and knew that they would be the kind of people who would respond to the invitation. This religious diversity is a good thing. Religion in the United States is an important factor in how we work together and how democracy works, actually, to have this diversity and respect for one another, and it makes things work. Here, take a listen to Professor Clayton Christensen and the learning experience on this particular topic that he had. This is actually from 2014. You decide if he's on to something in this conversation about democracy and religion.
Some time ago, I had a conversation with a Marxist economist from China. He was coming to the end of a Fulbright fellowship here in Boston. And I asked him if he had learned anything that was surprising or unexpected. And without any hesitation, he said, yeah. I had no idea how critical religion is to the functioning of democracy. The reason why democracy works, he said, is not because the government was designed to oversee what everybody does, but rather democracy works because most people, most of the time, voluntarily choose to obey the law. And in your past, most Americans attended a church or a synagogue every week, and they were taught there by people who they respected. My friend went on to say that Americans followed these rules because they had come to believe that they weren't just accountable to society, they were accountable to God. My Chinese friend heightened a vague but nagging concern I've harbored inside that as religion loses its influence over the lives of Americans, what will happen to our democracy? Where are the institutions that are going to teach the next generation of Americans that they too need to voluntarily choose to obey the laws? Because if you take away religion, you can't hire enough police.
In their groundbreaking work, American Grace, Robert Putnam and David Campbell discuss the need for social capital to operate in the world. It's in part what Christensen is speaking of, social capital. It's the social networks and relationships that we have with one another that makes things work well in the United States of America. Our American grace towards others and our ability to make connections with others. On a Sunday morning, the bonding that we have is a social capital building that we are working on. We're working on building connections and relationships that are bonding. But there's another aspect to this social capital, and it's referred to as bridging. Bridging is the work of finding a common good among other religious traditions, the people we don't worship with. And so in my office, I've always brought with me this particular print. It's a bridge. I don't know if you can tell that that's a bridge, but that's what it is, an image of a bridge. And I think it's fundamental to our Christian values that we are bridge builders and that we bridge and make connections with people of other faith traditions and even within our Christian faith. How do we bridge across other denominations? This work is fundamental. And it makes it really impossible for the work of the United States to be united if we don't have this kind of work going on of bridging and building bridges. How can you and I act as bridges in our Christian faith. I think it's possible for us to live faithfully and think critically as we encounter other religions. And along the way, we will learn more about our faith as we invite others to encounter Christ and God through Christ. So in the coming weeks, let's explore this concept of what other major religions have to teach and to understand, and invite others to join us as we bridge what divides us and unite in the ways of bringing about the common good for the kingdom of God to be in our midst. So be it, and may it be so.